Senator Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listening to my friends across the aisle today and the rationale behind the president's budget proposal, I'm fearful the White House is using the same voodoo accounting that brought down SVC Bank. You know, I'm often asked what's the greatest threat our nation faces, and I'm here to tell you it's not Russia, it's not China, it's not North Korea, it's not Iran. And though I love the environment, it's not climate change. The greatest long-term threat the United States faces is our national debt. At $31 trillion and growing, paying almost $500 billion in interest, last year alone, this national debt is unsustainable. For 2 years, Democrat one-party rules controlled Washington, D.C., and ran up the tab, maxed out the nation's credit cards on the backs of hardworking Americans. In the first 20 months of office, President Biden has spent more than any other president in United States history. This reckless spending agenda has added another $3.7 trillion to the debt, a 13% increase, and cost hardworking families in the wave of 40-year high skyrocketing inflation, which we all know is a tax on hardworking Americans. Under this administration, energy prices have risen more than 37%. Home heating fuel more than 52%, electricity prices more than 23%, gasoline more than 45%, grocery more than 19%. All the while, real wages aren't keeping up with inflation. To the Biden administration, these added costs are just a number. But to families I meet in rural America, it's their hard-earned wages that now get nearly 20% less groceries for their families than they did just 2 years ago. And now the White House gives this committee a new budget that will almost double the annual interest and soon push our annual deficit towards $2 trillion a year. And if that's not enough, they promise $4.7 trillion in new taxes, including raising corporate taxes that, as we all know, are going to be passed down to consumers, further fanning inflation. This budget issue and how we handle it will be the defining action of this committee and the 118th Congress. Let me tell you what this reminds me of. This is the equivalent of a young adult who's maxed out their own personal credit card, and now, instead of cutting expenses, ask their parents for another credit card. I ask you, what parent would comply with this ill-fated request? Folks, we have to use this debt ceiling issue to pry the nation's maxed out credit card from Joe Biden's hands. He must come to the negotiating table and work towards balancing the budget. If not, he must be held responsible for the dramatic increase in spending over the next 2 years, the past 2 years, and blowing through the debt ceiling. He and he alone will bear this responsibility. Listen, this committee needs to take back the nation's credit card and restore the purchasing power back to the American people. I will not support any budget that does not work to responsibly balance. If the president would negotiate in good faith, this would be a different story. There's historical precedent for coupling spending reductions with increasing the debt limit. For the sake of my children and grandchildren, I will hold the line. The president will not get permission from me to increase the debt limit without real substantive cuts to our spending. I hope the members of this committee will join me. Director Young, does this administration have any intention of negotiating in good faith with Republicans to stop this reckless spending and get back to balancing the budget? Yes or no?
Senator, I've been here, this is my 3rd year on the budget. There's a budget process, there's an appropriations process. We work together every year to fund the government and talk about spending priorities.
So my question is,
and we are happy to do that again this year.
So yes or no, will this president work in good faith towards negotiating a budget that gets back to a balanced budget?
As he has done in December, he will work on a bipartisan basis to talk about what the appropriate spending levels are.
That doesn't sound very optimistic to me. How do you intend to do that when you know our goals and you bring us a budget that's a month late and has the highest sustained levels of taxes, spending, and deficits in American history?
Senator, let me be clear. The president is not going to support cutting programs that are essential to working families in this country. What he believes is correct is ask those at the top of the ladder to pay more so we can invest in those working families you talked about. I'm from a small town, less than 2,000. What they tell me is they want infrastructure. They want the government to work for them. This budget does that by asking billionaires who don't exist in Clinton, Louisiana, and places like it, to pay what they pay when they go to work as an effective tax rate.
Last quick
That's what the
question.
budget
Whose idea was it to cut $600 million from the Department of Homeland Security when there's a raging crisis at the nation's southern border?
I'm happy to give you a sheet of paper that shows the DHS budget is increased by 9%. That is not correct. There is a fee issue on passenger fees where it is literally a budget scoring issue where DHS will keep passenger fees rather than give them back to the Treasury. In actual dollars, in budget authority, the Department of Homeland Security goes up by 9%, including a $4.7 billion contingency fund that would fund our operations at the southwest border.
This is the
which we
funky
hope-
voodoo accounting I'm talking about that gets this nation in trouble, that brings down banks as well. But we look forward to working with your office. We'll show you our numbers, we'll show you the budget shown to us, and we'll look at yours as well. Thank you so much for being here.